Good day, everybody. This is Susan Elliott, host of Mean Lady Talking podcast, and I really don't like to do these intros to podcasts, but this one really calls for one, and this one's going to be a bit long, so bear with me, please. I want to welcome you to episode 63A and B, and it's going to be a little confusing, and I didn't mean to confuse you. I'm going to explain to you what happened with these podcasts. Somebody wrote me an email. It's a woman who had been pissed off at me for a long time, and I didn't know that she was pissed off at me because she didn't tell me she was pissed off at me. I had answered her email on the blog a long time ago. At least I think this is her email. And I also believe that I did it early in the podcast because my original intention with the podcast was to do 2 a week, one Mail We Get Mail, which was a very popular feature of the blog where people would just send me their situations and I would answer them, and one topic. And I wanted to do that for the podcast. But as you know, the podcast has taken a lot more to edit than I thought that it would, so I haven't been able to do 2 podcasts a week. And as you know, the podcast is still not self-supporting, and if it's not self-supporting by September, I'm going to end it. But if I could get even more support for it, I could get an editor, and I could actually get it up to 2 a week, because that is really what I would like to do. So in the early days of the podcast, I read some of the old Mail We Got Mail, and I think this is one of them. I didn't go back and check because all these other things happen, which I'll explain in a minute. So anyway, speaking of the early days of the podcast, I finally got all of the show notes onto MeanLadyTalking.com. Some of them are out of order, some of them are incomplete, but I have all the show notes over from GettingPastYourBreakup.com. And if you go to MeanLadyTalking.com, all the show notes should be there. And I know that some of them probably have links that don't work because they probably link back to GettingPastYourBreakup.com. But if you come across it, please feel free to send me email because there's like 80-something show notes, because even though there's 63 podcasts, many of them have multiple episodes in one. So if you're listening and there's a link that doesn't work, something's not quite right, something that's missing, send me email, meanladytalking@meanladytalking.com. And it's taken me a long time to do it. I know I started this sometime in March or April, but I was doing 2 websites at one time, GettingPastYourBreakup.com and MeanLadyTalking.com. And putting these websites together has cost me a lot of money, and it's taken me a long time. I've tried to do a lot of the work myself. Both are almost complete. And I'm still working on GettingPastYourBreakup.com, and I'm still going to go through all the show notes on MeanLadyTalking.com. So anyway, I was working on these 2 podcasts. And then somebody came along in the Facebook group and posted about going on this fabulous vacation by himself. And I started to respond to it, but then I pulled back because a lot of times I will go in and I will say something in a post, and then people will start responding to me because I'm the administrator, I'm the author of the books, yada, yada. So I didn't want to hijack his post, and I've tried to be real sensitive about that. So I started a post of my own. Now, there's a reason why I started a post of my own. Not only did his post inspire me, but the woman who wrote me that had been pissed off at me forever, her post had inspired me, and I'm leaving out a lot of the stuff about her relationship because some of it could be identifying information and I don't want to read all that, so I didn't read all that, but I was in this very inspired mood. So I was inspired by the email that I got. I did the first podcast about that, and then I saw the vacation post and I was very inspired by that, and I did my own post and I was feeling so inspired, but I didn't want anybody, especially the woman that had been pissed off at me for a long time, if there were other people like her, I didn't want them to be pissed off at me, although a lot of people have gotten pissed off at me over the years. Trust me, I know this. I know that I can be harsh. I mean, the name of the podcast is Mean Lady Talking. I know where I come from. And that is because, as I explained in the very first podcast, people did that for me. So I understand. And in the middle of all this, The very first comment to my post was somebody saying, that's all well and good about traveling by yourself, but some people can't afford it. The comment I made to her immediately was, I was a single mom with 3 kids not getting a lot in child support, and I did it. That was all I said. It was a very short comment. I just wanted to forestall anybody who be reading it and thinking, I don't have any money either. She's right. You can't travel when you have money, blah, blah, blah. Didn't want her comment about some people can't afford to travel alone to kind of derail what I was trying to express. And there are many people who have other mental blocks about traveling alone. I'll miss my ex, I'll be nervous, I'm not sure, I'll be lonely, blah, blah, blah. And people could always come up with an excuse like, well, I don't really have the money for that, when the real reason is really something else. So I didn't want other people to read her comment and kind of hook into it right away. So I came in and said very simply, I was a single mom, I didn't get a lot in child support, and I put money away to do it. And then her next thing was, I didn't even have the money to eat last week. And I thought, what? Like, that's crazy. And then I went into a long thing about how when I had 3 kids living at home and I was scrimping and saving and their father wasn't giving me any child support, and I asked him for a raise and he said, his wife gets on the phone and she says that the last time the kids were at the house, my middle son wasn't even wearing socks. Like, I wasn't buying him socks. He was into grunge and he was following Nirvana. So he's wearing Chucks, the sneakers, and no socks. She acted like I was partying like a rock star on $45 a week. So I didn't fight with them about it. I hadn't had a raise in 8 years. I did what I needed to do. I worked a full-time job during the day. I started a therapy practice at night in my office at home, and overnight I did emergency psychiatric services. I worked hard, and many days I fell asleep at lunchtime in my car at work. I did what I needed to do, but I also put money away for me, not just to put food on the table. I would have been very depressed if that's the only place my money went. My money for self-care wasn't a luxury. It was a necessity. In order to take care of those kids, I had to take care of myself. And that's the message. And my post was meant to be inspiring. It was meant to be encouraging. And it was meant to tell people that you can do it. And when she came in with the financial issue, I wanted to nip that in the bud, but I also wanted to let her know that I've been there. I've been in a situation where I didn't have a lot of money and I still did it. And it's not because I'm so high and mighty and wonderful. It's because I know that it absolutely has to be done. And I'm sorry she didn't like it, and I'm sorry she left the group over it, but that's my truth and that's what I tell people. And as far as I'm concerned, I was trying to write an inspiring and encouraging post, and she came in with negative Nelly. I really didn't want other people to hook into that. I really wanted other people to feel encouraged and inspired to do their self-care, including traveling by themselves. It's a magnificent experience. My therapist told me in like 1989, when I was trying to scrimp and save and wasn't getting any child support when I first started seeing her, it took me 10 months to get a dime out of my husband, and then he had broken his arm, so I got hardly anything out of him because he was on workers' comp, and then it stayed that way for a very long time. But she told me that on the plane they tell you, put your oxygen mask on first and then tend to your children. She said to me, you have to take care of yourself first before you can tend to your children. This was a brand new concept to me. I had no idea. So I put money away for therapy, for conferences, for workshops, for going to many different things, my own self-care items, my bubble bath, my candles, my comforters, the things that made me feel good, and my solo travel. I didn't care if I put 50 cents a week away. That's what I did. If you go to the goals section of the workbook, there's stuff there that's not in the books. But I talk about how to save money and how to meet short-term goals and long-term goals. And that's exactly what I did. Now, this was a group member that I really liked, that I knew, that I appreciated her. I appreciated her support of the of the podcast, but I really didn't think that her comment was really appropriate, but I left it there. And I answered her because I wanted to answer anybody else that might have concerns about the finances. I'm not patting myself on the back. What I'm trying to say is that this is a program of building your life. And I'm not saying this as an ego thing. I'm saying it because I know what tough times are. And I know how easy it would have been for me to say, well, I'm not even getting any child support. Or how could I go traveling by myself? How can I go to therapy? How can I do this? How can I do that? It would have been easy for me to say that, but I refuse to say that. I refuse to say that because my therapist told me when I first started this, you have to make your recovery a priority. And I tell people that all the time when people say, oh, I can't afford your boot camps. And I'm not saying this because it's my boot camps. I'm saying it because people should be able to put the money aside for things that are going to be with them forever. I say people spend thousands and thousands of dollars on weddings when the divorce rate is over 50%. They don't think anything about spending thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars on a wedding. But to recover, to become a healthy person, to learn how to build your life, they're not going to pay for anything. That's crap. I'm telling you it's crap. And I'm not telling it so that you can spend money on my stuff. I'm telling it because a healthy life makes recovery stuff a priority, and that includes things you have to pay for. I don't care what your financial situation is. I don't care if you're on welfare and food stamps. You have got to take money each week and put it into self-care. Whether you buy bubble bath, whether you buy a nice cushy towel, whether you buy a comforter for your bed, whatever you do, you have to figure out a way to do it. When I went to Europe by myself, I went to a bargain basement travel agent. It took me days to get to Europe. I took the most circuitous route there was besides walking. I was exhausted with how many times I had to change planes and lay over here and lay over there. It was ridiculous. But I found that deal, and that was before there was Google, and being able to afford that wasn't easy. But I got to Europe, and I felt good about that. And no one can ever take that feeling away from you. When you put the money aside and you go somewhere, and I talk about going to Reno, not knowing a single person and going to Reno. I got on a plane and I went, and nobody can take away the feeling that you get from doing that stuff. And I don't toot my own horn when I'm telling you this stuff. I'm telling you, where there's a will, there's a freaking way. Find it. And if you don't see it, you have to think about what you need to do to get there. And I'm not being harsh, and I'm not being hard, and I'm not trying to say all this because I don't have empathy for people that don't have any money. I'm saying I've been on hard financial times, and I knew that the last thing that I needed to be doing was to ignore my own self-care. That would have been so depressing. Working 3 jobs to feed these kids, to put food on the table, to buy them clothes, even socks that they didn't want to wear, and do nothing for myself would have been so depressing. But to get on a plane and go to Europe by myself, it's something nobody can ever take away from me. And it's something that to this day makes me feel good that I did it. But people get pissed at me. And I'm telling you these things not because I want to make you feel bad, not because I don't appreciate where you're coming from, but because I want you to believe in yourself and to believe that there is a way. And as these 2 podcasts that you're going to hear illustrate, people get pissed off at me all the time. But I got pissed at the people that told me the truth about me when I needed to hear it. The difference between this group member and me was that she left the group. I didn't leave the group. I stayed around. I had the gift of desperation. If somebody said to me, oh, don't give me that bullshit, which they said to me a lot, it didn't matter if I said I don't have money. I don't care if I said I needed to loan my ex my car because XYZ. I don't care what it was I said to them. When I was full of shit, they told me I was full of shit and exactly what I needed to hear. I tell you guys this stuff for your own good, not because I'm trying to toot my horn, not because I'm trying to say that I'm better than everybody else, because I'll tell you, in this first podcast that you're about to hear, you will hear what a sick puppy I was. And what I try to tell people, and what I always try to tell people, is that I can do it. You can do it. Listen to this first podcast. Listen to how freaking sick I was. But I'm trying to impress upon you, and I understand that when people don't have any money, and I understand when people come up against a whole bunch of terrible things, they have to take care of sick family members, there are other things to do. I understand all that, but I don't want you to become a negative Nelly and say, oh, I can't do this, I don't have any money. I don't want you to shut the door on things. That's what positive self-talk is about. That's what the affirmations are about. It's about finding the possibilities. It's about making things happen in your life. And if you don't want possibilities, then fine, don't listen to me. I don't care. I want to talk to the people who do want to find possibilities. I want to talk to the people who want to be inspired to do things, to get out of the ruts that they're in. Those are the people I want to talk to. So move out of the way and let me talk to those people. I'm sorry if people get pissed off at me, but I'm not going to change my message. I'm not going to change my tone. And I'm not going to change my stance. And if you're not ready to hear these messages from me, then go find somewhere else. I've had friends who said to me, if I heard you talk the way you talk when I first came into this recovery thing, I would have run the other way. I get it. There are some people who'll be like, yep, no. But I teach what I know, and I teach what worked for me. And people told me to stop believing my own bullshit when I first got here. And I made excuses for absolutely everything. I had a V on my forehead that was neon, and you could see from another galaxy. A V for victim. I had C for codependent. I had all kinds of letters on my forehead. And the people that I came to know are the ones that had my best interest in mind, that told me, stop listening to your own bullshit. If you're looking for sympathy, you'll find it in the dictionary between shit and syphilis. And that's exactly what I needed to hear. If that sort of thing is too rough for you, then go listen to Louise Hay. And I have no problem with Louise Hay. The woman's adorable. She touches a lot of lives. I'm a big fan. But I am not Louise Hay. There are people that follow her, and there are people that follow me. If you don't like my message, go follow Louise Hay. Knock yourself out. I'm just saying, if I'm not your cup of tea, go find somebody who is your cup of tea. But don't have me not be your cup of tea because I am asking you not to lie to yourself, and not to be a victim, and not to be a martyr, and not to bullshit yourself about things that you can actually do. This program is about working out the bad and working in the good. And part of working in the good is building your life and making yourself a priority and making your self-care a priority. And part of self-care is traveling. And if you can't do it today, do it tomorrow. If you can't do it, if you can't go to Europe on even a bargain basement travel sale, a local hotel, just do something for yourself. But don't make your self-care a non-priority, because you cannot get healthy doing that. The other thing that I want to say really quickly is that the June 21st camp is full. It's been full. There's a waiting list, but everybody's registered. Everybody's ready for their first call. And there are going to be other ways to work with me in the coming months. If you want to find out about the new offerings that are coming, because this is my last boot camp that I'm going to do, please go to gettingpastyourbreakup.com. And when you first go there, in about 2 seconds, a little window will pop up and say subscribe. Just subscribe, and you will hear about all the new stuff that's going to take place. This is my very last boot camp, and if you're a counselor, a therapist, or if you're interested in doing facilitator work, I'm going to be doing facilitator training so that you would be able to offer Getting Past Your Breakup boot camps afterwards. I had a facilitator 2 boot camps ago. I have a facilitator in this boot camp. So if you want to train and offer the boot camps, if people come to me and ask me about them, I will refer them to you when you get going. But I'm going to be doing some online groups. I'm going to be doing some other things that are less intense than the boot camps. I'm going to do some online seminars and workshops. But this is my absolute last boot camp. So here are these 2 podcasts. Everything's out of order. everything I just talked about just now, what happened in the Facebook group with the group members talking about the money and leaving and stuff happened last. What you're going to hear next happened second, and what you're going to hear last happened first. So I hope you got that straight. I will talk to you all soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Announced in the coming months.
Welcome to the Mean Lady Talking Podcast, the tough talking, advice giving show by the not really mean lady, Susan J. Elliott.
Good day, everybody. This is Susan Elliott, host of Mean Lady Talking Podcast, and welcome to episode 63. I don't want to confuse you, but I have already recorded episode 63, and I'm going to publish it at the same time that I publish this one, and I'll title that one episode 63B. But after I finished recording that one, I realized that the letter that I had gotten, the email that I had gotten, was very inspiring. And it should be very inspiring to anybody who might be at the beginning of this journey. The woman who wrote me had been angry at me for a long time. As I've talked about before, my vision for the podcast has been 2 episodes a week. I would love to actually do that if I could either get more support through Patreon or I could get some editors. But as it stands now, with how much time it takes me to edit, I can't do 2 episodes a week. But in the early days, when I thought that that was what I was shooting for, and I didn't have emails with situations described, I started reading some of the old letters, and I believe that this is one of them. I haven't gone back and checked, but I believe that this is one of them. And I didn't realize that the person had such a resentment against me over this letter for so long. And I didn't realize that she had gone back yet again to this relationship. So it was quite a surprise to me to read the letter that you're going to be introduced to when you listen to episode 63, which will now be called 63B. Anyway, I thought about how inspiring her letter was. And I thought about the fact that many times when I'm reading reviews of Getting Past Your Breakup, which I don't do all the time, I'll sometimes get hung up on a criticism, a critique, and that's one of the reasons why I don't read reviews very much, is because anybody who knows me knows that one of the mainstream media reviews of Getting Past Your Breakup called the affirmation section New Agey and Oprah-esque, and I took great offense to that, and I have blathered on about that for 10 years now. It bothered me so very much. So I try not to read reviews because even if 99.9% of them are positive, which mine are, and even from the best places, they're very positive, somebody can say one thing negative and it really sticks in my craw. And one guy who criticized the book said, "Methinks the lady doth protest too much." This is mostly about her story. And anybody who's taken offense at Getting Past Your Breakup takes offense about the parts of it that are about my story. And it's usually guys. I don't know why guys have such an issue with that. Women don't seem to have the same issue. But those of you who follow my stories over the years know that I tend to tell the same stories time and time again because there's some which are really illustrative of my journey. And people that are coming to my work new might not have ever heard it before. So I apologize to the people that have followed me over the years. I've heard the same stories over and over again. Every now and again, I choose to tell a story that I haven't told before. And this is one time where I'm going to do just that. And the reason that I'm going to do it is because this woman inspired me. And I know that she was angry at me for a long time over what I said to her. And when I tell you my story, it will really illustrate where I've been, where I've gotten to, and why I tend to be a bit of a hard ass, part of a mean lady. When my father was terminally ill, he was at the VA hospital in Providence, Rhode Island. My mother was living in Providence, Rhode Island. I was living in Providence, Rhode Island. And I would drive my mother at night over to the VA hospital to see my father. And my mother had had a workers' comp case. She had hurt her back on the job, and they wanted her to have surgery, and she had been putting it off. and it was a major surgery. They were going to go in and do all kinds of crazy things. So my father was only given 3 months to live when he was diagnosed with lung cancer at the VA hospital, and my mother went over to visit him every night, and it was hard to find parking over there, so I would drive her over. I lived a couple of blocks from her, and we lived about a half a mile from the VA hospital, so I'd pick her up, drop her off there, go back home, deal with the kids, and come back and pick her up, and I would visit my father during the day. So my mother could not hold off the workers' comp people anymore. They said she had to have the surgery. She had to have it now. Otherwise, they were cutting off her benefits. So she went to the VA hospital to explain this to my father. And I go to pick her up, and I see this little figure. My mother was small. She was like 5 feet tall. She weighed like 100 pounds. So I see this little tiny figure in the VA hospital lobby, sort of illuminated with the back of her. She was just a little shadow sitting there. She looked so forlorn. I felt so sorry for her. I didn't even know what happened, but I felt sorry for her. So she gets in the car, and I was like, "What's up?" And she says, "He threw me out." And I said to her, "Why did he throw you out?" And she said, "Because I told him that I was going into the hospital to have back surgery, and he didn't understand." And I don't know what the real story was. It was hard for me to imagine my father throwing her out, but yeah, whatever. I mean, they fought their entire lives. And my father was 70 years old. He was 27 when they got married. So they had been fighting for 45 years. And, you know, whatever happened. But I remember my mother was very upset. I drove my mother home, and she went into the hospital for her back surgery a few days later. She's scheduled for surgery at 7 a.m. this one morning. And at 5:30 a.m., we get the call, my father passed away at the VA hospital. I felt awful that my father passed away because he was all by himself, but I mean, nobody would have been allowed to visit at that time anyway. But my mother had to have this surgery. There's no way that the workers' comp board was going to understand if she postponed it again, because they didn't understand when she told them that my father was terminally ill. They didn't understand. They didn't care. They just wanted her to have the surgery. So, of course, my father passes away at 5:30 in the morning. My mother's scheduled go under the knife at 7. And we decide that we're going to let her go under the knife because she's got to have the surgery done to keep her workers' comp. And now that my father's passed away, she's going to lose his income. So we tell the doctor what happened. We tell him to go ahead with the surgery. She goes into the surgery. We go over to the VA hospital. We go over to the funeral parlor. We run around like lunatics. And then we go to see my mother in recovery. The first thing my mother asks is, "How's your father?" First thing she asks. And we're like, he's okay, because he was okay. I mean, that wasn't really a lie. I guess he was okay. He wasn't in pain anymore. So all day long, she would say, "Make sure you go over to see your father. Make sure you go over to see your father." So we would leave her, run over to the funeral parlor, pick out a casket, make arrangements. And we had to push the funeral out about a week because she was going to be in the hospital. She had had a major surgery. She was not going to be anywhere close to being able to be out for the funeral anytime soon. My sister and I are running around like lunatics. And we kept going back to the hospital, back to the funeral parlor, back to the hospital, to the VA hospital. My mother was in another hospital. So we're running back and forth between two hospitals, a funeral parlor, and we're lying to my mother the entire day. We leave when visiting hours are over at 8 o'clock. We leave and we feel like we got through this. The next day we're going to go. We're going to tell my mother that my father passed away, and we'll deal with it from there. My sister and I walk into my mother's house. The phone is ringing off the hook. We're like, what the hell? Like, we have just had the day from hell. Like, what the hell is this? We pick up the phone. It's the hospital. My aunt in Georgia got drunk and called my mother and said, "I'm sorry to hear about Joe." So my mother says to her, "Yeah, I know he's sick, but, you know, as soon as I get out, I'm going to go see him." And my aunt goes, "How can you go see him? He died today." And my mother was hysterical. My sister and I jump in the car, fly over to the hospital. Now we have to go calm my mother down. She's hysterical when we walk. And my mother was not a crier. She's hysterical. She feels like she betrayed him. She abandoned him. He died never forgiving her. Oh my God, what a train wreck. It took us a while to calm her down, and then the nurse came in and sedated her so that she could get some sleep. It was exactly what we didn't want to have happen. It was exactly what happened. Just a mess. During this time, when I'm running around like a lunatic, we lived in a 3-family building that we owned. We had the first floor was actually empty. Friends of us had moved out, and they had moved out because they knew about the abuse. They heard the abuse, and they had actually referred me to the wife's mother's boss, who was an attorney. He was a family law attorney. And I was filing for divorce and a restraining order during one of our episodes. And they had gotten so tired of the fact that I had actually gone to see the lawyer. I had actually come clean about all the abuse. They heard the abuse and they couldn't handle it. They moved out. Of course, I was in no frame of mind to move out yet. The apartment was empty and we had stored stuff down there. And I get into my car one morning and my entire dashboard has been destroyed. My husband had bought me an AM/FM cassette in high-end stereo for the car and had bolted it in so that it was basically not removable because we didn't live in the best neighborhood. So whoever tried to remove the car stereo had basically destroyed the dashboard in an effort to do that. I was hysterical. So I call my husband at work. He comes home. The police come, yada, yada, yada. Make a report. This is going on while I'm running to the hospital with my mother. I'm running to the funeral parlor for my father. This happens. Then I go downstairs to the first floor apartment because I'm going to move some stuff down there. And I open up and I notice that half of my stuff is gone, including a 10-speed bike I had just gotten, including a bunch of Christmas presents. I had put a bunch of the kids' stuff down there so that because it was a huge apartment with hardwood floors and it was big and open and beautiful, and they were able to basically ride their bikes around, their little big wheels and things like that. And I opened the door, half the stuff is gone. I'm like, what the hell? So I realized somebody's broken into the apartment and taken whatever was in there. As I pass the basement door, I hear somebody downstairs in the basement. And I'm like, oh my God. So foolish me, I start walking down the basement stairs. Now, this was an 18-something house. The basement was one of the creepiest places you could ever think of being. I mean, it was totally spooky. And I'm walking down there, and all of a sudden, I realize that there's somebody in a sleeping bag in the basement. And I'm like, oh my God. I call my husband from work, and I call the police department. My husband gets there first. He goes downstairs, goes to get the kid. The kid rushes up. The Providence Police Department's coming in. The kid runs past them. My husband's chasing him. They stop my husband, throw my husband up against the wall because they think that he's the one who's the criminal here. And he's like, no, it's him. He's the one. The kid that's running. He's the one that broke in, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, that whole thing goes on. This is what goes on in that week. I'm planning for my father's funeral. I'm going to the hospital to visit my mother and calm her down. She's still hysterical every single day. And now I'm dealing with the car insurance and the house insurance over what was stolen and filing criminal charges. The kid was the same person that broke into the car and broke into the house and was living in our basement. After my father passes away, after we get my mother out of the hospital and my oldest brother shows up, prodigal child come home, hadn't talked to my mother in years, and all of a sudden he comes in playing the big shot. Oh, I'm here to save the day, blah, blah, blah. He makes this huge deal about walking my mother up the stairs in the church. I mean, my mother could barely walk. And we had the funeral in this old stone church that had 1 million stone steps going up to the top. Big brother is walking my mother up the stairs. And my mother's just thrilled about this because they've been estranged for years. And they're going to continue to be estranged, but she doesn't know that. She thinks this is the opportunity where he's going to actually be a human being and be okay to her. No, that was never going to happen. And for me, it was just completely unacceptable because he did nothing. He wasn't there for my father. He wasn't there for my mother. He had nothing to do with planning the funeral. He had nothing to do with all the craziness that went on around there. And now he shows up to be the hero, which is what he did all the time. It pissed me off. So I'm just angry. And everybody's fawning over him. Isn't it wonderful how nice he is to your mother? No, he's not being nice to my mother. He's being a phony asshole. That's what he's being. He's a narcissist who loves the attention. Has nothing to do with my mother. If it had anything to do with my mother, his ass would have been up here before this. So I'm angry. All this stuff goes on. The weekend after all of this craziness is over with, I collapse on the bed. I come out of the bathroom in the morning. I brush my teeth. I come out. I get like 2 feet out of the bathroom into my bedroom, and I collapse on the bed. I had an anxiety attack. I go to the hospital. I think I'm having a heart attack. It's not a heart attack. It's anxiety. They didn't give me anything for it. They basically told me I was having an anxiety attack and sent me home. What the doctor said to me was, go home, relax. You've had a lot of stuff go on. I explained the whole situation to him. He said, you've had a lot of stuff go on. This is an anxiety attack, blah, blah, blah. And I realized many years later that my grief manifests in anxiety. I go home. My husband's grandmother lived on the 3rd floor of this house, and his aunt and uncle came up that weekend. I was completely out of it. I couldn't say hello to anybody. I couldn't talk. I couldn't do anything. I went home. I laid on the bed, and I just felt awful. He comes in, he's like, aren't you going to go upstairs and say hello to my aunt and uncle? And I was just like, please leave me alone. I'm just collapsing over here. He picks me up. He throws me off the bed. We have this knockdown, drag-out fight where he says, you didn't give a shit about your father. You haven't shed one tear, and now you're going to use your father dying as an excuse to not say hello to my aunt and uncle. It was one of the most violent fights we ever had. And all because I didn't want to go upstairs and say hello to his aunt and uncle. And he was screaming at me, you didn't give a shit about your father. I didn't see you shed a tear. Like, I could shed a tear when all of this drama was going on. I had no time to shed a tear, which was why I wound up in the hospital with an anxiety attack. He didn't even ask me how I was when I got home. During that fight, he slaps me in the side of the head 3 or 4 times. At one point, he punches me in the head. Fast forward a few years. After I was hit in the face with the newel post during the last night of our marriage, when I officially ended it, when he went up to wake up the kids and then the dog went after him and I was trying to hang on to the banister and he was pulling me and I turned around and my face hit the newel post. When I went to the hospital, because my eye was completely closed and I had the examination, the doctor had diagnosed me with TMJ when my jaw was clicking, and he asked me how long I had that. And this was a doctor who was on to the fact that I didn't just fall down the stairs and hit the newel post, which is what I told him. And he was furious with me that I would not admit to being abused. I was just adamant that I fell down the stairs. So he wanted to know about the TMJ, and he kept telling me that the TMJ wouldn't have manifested itself the day after because my face was so swollen and everything. And he said you had to have a facial injury or something before that. And I remembered that after that fight, after my father died, that my jaw started clicking then. I didn't know that it was TMJ. I didn't know what it was. So my jaw was clicking then, and I started having really tough times going to sleep. And the lack of sleep was actually leading me to feel depressed. And then when I lost my job that January, it exacerbated the depression that I had been feeling ever since that little situation with my mother being in the hospital, my father dying, my house and car being broken into. That little nugget of time was when I should have gotten out, and I didn't. So everything that went on after that was lots of insomnia, lots of depression, lots of problems, but the doctor identified the TMJ as one of my problems. So this is the embarrassing part. After I get all of this diagnosis and I go to a dentist after my face cleared up, after the swelling went down from the black eye, and I went to the dentist and I got a mouth guard, and my husband and I are now separated, I go to him and I tell him that I had been suffering from TMJ, which led to insomnia, which led to restless sleep, which led to depression, which led to this, which led to that, and that the TMJ was a result of being smacked in the head. In other words, I'm trying to tell him, and this is the embarrassing part, that he caused my TMJ. My TMJ caused my depression, which caused me to be all the things he blamed me to be. So basically, I was admitting that I was all the things he said I was. Terrible wife, terrible mother, terrible this, terrible that. But it was because I was depressed. It was because I had TMJ. It was because I wasn't sleeping. And all of that was because he had once hit me. So I was trying to get him to see that all my problems, all of our problems stem from my problems would stem from him hitting me. I was basically letting him off the hook while asking him to give me another chance at the same time. It was ridiculous. This is just to tell you how desperate, how codependent, how ridiculous I was, how sick I was. This is how sick I was. And the reason why I tell these stories is because I want you to understand that today I'm a person that if you look at me wrong, you're out. I have strong boundaries. I have strong values. I have strong insistence on treat me right or get the hell out. That's what I have. And if you don't treat me right, I am not going to put up with you in my life for another second. I tell the stories because I want people to understand how sick I really was. And I just spent 15 minutes telling that story because there's a lot of background to it. What it results in is me trying to come up with anything to give my husband a free pass while at the same time basically telling him, this is why I was the way that I was, but you had something to do with it. And if we get together, you can't hit me anymore. What I also did at the same time, this was also during the same time period. I don't remember if it was the same day or another day because I was grasping at straws. I gave him the book, Janet Wodit's Adult Children of Alcoholics, and I asked him to read it. And that it would explain all my behavior. It would explain my fear of abandonment. It would explain my hypervigilance. It would explain everything. And when I saw him, the day that I begged him to come back, I said to him, did you read the book? Which I know he didn't. So let's be honest about that. He didn't freaking read the book. And I said to him, did you read the book? And he said, yes. And I said, doesn't it explain things? He goes, it doesn't explain everything, which is bullshit. Adult Children of Alcoholics had my name on every freaking page. It explained absolutely everything about me. There were very few things about me that book didn't explain. So, first of all, I don't believe that he read it. And second of all, it did explain everything. He just didn't want to hear it. But this is how desperate I was. I'm handing him a book going, here, read this book. Don't you see how crazy I was? And now there's an answer and now I'm going to get help and now everything will be fine. I mean, how sick do you have to be? I'm saying this to a man who was actively cheating on me and actively abusing me. This is who I'm saying this to. What a bunch of garbage. And I would like to shake the person that I used to be and say, what is wrong with you? Just stop it. But I did stop it. I had a great therapist and I had a great support system and I had great people in 12-step program who told me to stop it. Just stop it. There's a great Bob Newhart skit where he plays a therapist and the person is telling him all of their issues and he's just like, stop it. Just stop it. Like that's his answer is stop it. And that's my answer a lot of times to people is just stop it. A lot of times when I hear people acting out of desperation, people acting out of thinking that the other person has hurt them so much and owes them an apology, the other person owes them an explanation, the other person owes them something, I say stop it. Just stop it. Forget about expecting an apology. Forget about expecting an explanation. They're not going to give it. They don't have to give it. They don't owe you anything. Just move on with your life. And the reason why I'm so adamant with clients of mine, when they come to me with this stuff, and there's poor me, look at me, But I've been so abused. I've been so taken advantage of. I've been so misunderstood. This person has mistreated me. They refuse to apologize. They refuse to explain. They refuse to give me a chance to explain. My response is simply this: stop it. The reason I am not that person anymore, the person who would actually go to someone and present them with this whole line of garbage. Read this book. It explains every reason why I act the way that I act. I promise to straighten up and fly right. And there was another thing where he wanted to date me. He was sleeping with one of his coworkers, his partner at work, the woman that he married after me. He's sleeping with her and tells me he wants to date me. But we are legally married. So he's effectively cheating on both of us at the same time. And I'm going, oh yeah, sure, right, I'll date you. Sure, no problem. We never did go out on a date because I think either we got into an argument or my therapist said, what are you, crazy? But when he presented me with that ridiculous thing, I want to date my wife. No, you don't get to date your wife, not when you're dating someone else too. This isn't an open marriage. Just shut the hell up and go away. That's what the answer should have been. Not like, oh yeah, sure, honey. Yeah, let's date. We'll date and you'll date your girlfriend and we'll all feel a lot better. It's like ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. So when I get really adamant about people and their behavior, and what you're going to hear my responses in this letter that this woman wrote me a long time ago, and then the letter that she wrote me recently to say that all of a sudden my words kind of trickled into her head. I want you to listen, because I mean what I say and I say what I mean, and I sometimes say it while sounding mean. And that's the way I sometimes have to get through to people, because that's how sometimes people got through to me. My therapist was like, what are you, crazy? What are you saying this stuff to him for? Why are you looking for an explanation? Why are you looking for an apology? Why are you looking to get back with him? Why are you agreeing to date him? What are you, crazy? And that's the response I give to people now. I want you to listen to the story that I just told. I want you to understand the level of sickness that is involved in that. Why do I tell my story? Do I protest too much? I don't think so. I don't think so, because I don't think I'm alone. I don't think I'm the only person in the world who ever groveled before a cheating, abusive ex. I know I'm not the only person. I know I'm not the only person who sold my self-respect down the river for absolutely no reason in the world. And when I get tough with people, it's because I've been there. It's because I know what that feels like. And thank God he turned around and said, doesn't explain everything, because I was crushed. I was absolutely crushed. And I think it's hilarious now that I was crushed. I mean, for God's sakes, girl, straighten the hell up. Fly right. Thank God I had people around me who said, what the hell is wrong with you? Thank God I had people around me who said, if you're looking for sympathy, you'll find it in the dictionary between shit and syphilis. Because that's exactly what I was looking for me. You hit me in the face on a weekend when you shouldn't have hit me in the face, because I was grieving over my father in a way you didn't like, because I didn't say hello to your aunt and uncle, and you decided to throw me around the apartment and treat me like a piece of garbage. So please understand that I've been wacko ever since, and therefore all of my bad behavior is your fault, and therefore you should come back and let me make it all up to you. What the hell is that? Thank God I had people in my life, and thank God I finally was at a place in my life where I chose to listen to them. And I know that I don't get across everybody, and I know that I come across as a hard ass, and I know that I come across to people as, oh my God, like, could you be meaner? No, I could be meaner. You haven't seen anything yet. My story is one of desperation. It's when I was desperate to hold on to somebody who shouldn't have been qualified to breathe the same air as me. And then the gift of desperation when he told me no and toddled off with someone else. Thank freaking God. And I got the gift of desperation, which was, tell me how to stop feeling this way. I will do anything. If you tell me to stand on my head and spit nickels, I will do it. Just tell me what I need to do. Help me fix myself. I don't know how, and I need to know how, and I need to know how fast. Because I felt suicidal every single day, and I had 3 kids who needed their mother to not off herself. So when you listen to this next podcast, I want you to understand that I turned that devastating loss into the best thing that ever happened to me. How did I do it? I went to therapy. I listened to my therapist. I started affirmations. I went to support groups. I went to 12-step meetings. I went to therapy groups. I made my recovery a priority. If you don't make your recovery a priority, you're not going anywhere. When my kids were with their fathers, I packed my weekends full of things to do. I read so many people's posts saying, I'm so lonely, I'm so lonely, I'm so lonely. You need to get away from the loneliness. You need to fill your life. You need to fill it with hobbies, interests, and friends. If you don't have any, go find them and don't ever give them up for a relationship. There was no meetups then. There was no anything like that. I went to community bulletin boards where I live and the towns around me, and I looked at what was going on. I went to hobby shops and took classes there. I am the most unartistic person in the world. And I took painting classes. I took floral arranging classes. I did a whole bunch of silk flower arranging. I took crocheting. I took ceramics. I was really bad at ceramics. But I did it, and I met people in these places. I traveled by myself. I went to events by myself, conferences by myself. I remember I was in a 12-step meeting one day, and I saw this sign for a roundup in Reno, Nevada. I'd never been to Reno, Nevada, and this was a 12-step roundup. It was a bunch of different 12-step programs, and you know what? I decided that I was going. I went, I paid my registration, I bought my plane ticket, and away I went one weekend to Reno, Nevada. And I came out with like 50 friends. Got on the plane by myself, flew to a city I'd never been in, a city that's full of gambling and booze and all kinds of things. We did a little bit of gambling, but a lot of the people there was sober in AA. They didn't want to go into bars. But we found places where we could gamble where there was no alcohol, which isn't easy to find in Reno, but we found it. And I had a rollicking good time. I joined book clubs. I joined hobby groups. I did lots of stuff. I joined 2 gyms, and I had a bicycle customized for me, a Schwinn bicycle. I went to a little bicycle shop in Framingham, Massachusetts. I was working in Westboro, Massachusetts, and I went to Framingham, and I got a bicycle in a Schwinn shop customized to me, and it was so comfortable. It was so nice. And I used to ride around, as I've talked about many times. I used to do many, many miles on that bike on Sunday morning. And I lived in Warwick, Rhode Island, and I would go through these neighborhoods that the state had bought up. And all of these houses had been built in the 60s and bought up by the state to expand the airport in the late 70s, early 80s. So I would ride my bike through these neighborhoods where all the houses were boarded up, all of the lawns were overgrown, but I was in great shape. I belonged to 2 gyms. I worked out every single day, and on Sundays I did my little bike rides, and I would ride through those neighborhoods, and I would feel lonely. I would stop at these little places where there was nobody, and I would feel lonely. I would go out and I would sit by the airport. After I went through the neighborhoods, it came right out into the airport. And I would sit on these guardrails and I would watch the planes take off. And I would think about all the people on the planes going somewhere, coming back from somewhere. And there I was, lonely and forlorn, and just thinking that nothing was ever going to happen for me. I was never going to go anywhere. I was never going to be anything. But I was determined to make peace with the peace, as my therapist told me to do, and to start making plans for myself. And I put that in the workbook. I put it in the goals section. Make plans for yourself. Have goals in different areas. have some serious goals, have some fun goals, have some hobby goals, and put the plans together. That's what I did. And 9 years after I begged my cheating, abusive husband to come home, I met the most wonderful man in the world who loved me like there was no tomorrow. He adored me. I can count the serious arguments we had on one hand, and the majority of them happened early in our relationship. I never doubted that he was there for me. I never doubted that he loved me. He never called me a name. He never made me cry. And it was wonderful. And the reason why I met that man was because I had a full and fun life that I was absolutely okay with. I no longer was lonely. I felt like, okay, relationships aren't really for me. I don't do well in them. I obviously don't know how to meet anybody. I'm obviously not cut out for this. And I made my own life my own priority. And he saw that in me, and he was in the exact same spot. He'd been married twice before. He wasn't doing well in relationships. He had been dating somebody who wanted a serious relationship with him, and he just didn't want a serious relationship anymore. He felt the same way I did, but he had filled his own life with hobbies, interests, friends, and he went out and he did things and he met people, and that's how we met each other. One of his friends brought him to the party, and the party was held by one of my friends, and that's how we met each other. We both were out there doing our own thing, and we both had the same exact feeling that I don't need anybody, but we both loved our lives, and each of us had hobbies and interests that had zero interest toward the other one. So you don't have to find somebody who likes everything you like. We did not like anything that the other one liked, but we absolutely appreciated what the other person did with their life. And we came together. In the 9 years between when I made that idiotic comment to my first husband and the day that I met Michael, there was so many changes that I made. I did everything that I tell everybody else to do. Is that protesting too much? I don't think so. All the work that's in getting past your breakup is work that I did. And people would say to me, how did you do it? How did you do it? And I would pass it on to them. Before I became a therapist, I would just freely pass it on to them. This is what I did. This is what a relationship inventory looks like. This is what a life inventory looks like. This is the work I did on affirmations. I became a facilitator through the Pacific Institute and Investment Excellence. I became a grief therapist through the Grief Recovery Institute. I went and I chased it and chased it and chased it and chased it and figured out how to put it together to help others. Getting past your breakup is my process, but it's not the only stuff I did. I did other things, but what I pass on to everybody is what worked for me and for all these other people that I've been working for 25 years. Don't skip any parts of the program. Getting past your breakup originated the concept of no contact. You can find that stuff on the Internet Archives from 2005. You can find out I changed the way I teach affirmations. I teach affirmation in a very structured, systematic way that is completely original to getting past your breakup. I rely on a lot of other materials, but I always give credit to them. I never, ever don't give credit to them. I've done work on codependency. I've done work on adoptee issues. I've done work on all of that, and I don't make any of that stuff any of my central messages, but you guys know that I've done codependency boot camps, and I've done codependency workshops and webinars and all that other stuff. So I know a lot about that, but that's not the central piece of getting past your breakup. The central piece of getting past your breakup is my program, what I did that got me better and what I've shared with other people that got them better. It's the part that works. I tried other things that either didn't work or wouldn't work for the majority of people that I worked with that just worked for me for some unknown reason. Getting past your breakup works. Take the inspiration from this woman's story. Take the inspiration from my story. Know that you are not terminally unique. You are not any place where I haven't been. If I could do it at the level of sickness, the level of desperation where I was, anyone can do that. I say that in getting past your breakup. If I can do it, anybody can do it. I was one sick puppy, desperate for love and looking for it in all the wrong places. You can do this. Follow the program. Do it like your life depends on it, because it does. If you want a life that's second to none, If you want to turn the devastating loss into the best thing that ever happened to you, this is the way to go. I shared this story with you today to let you know how bad things were and how good things got. And you can do this. Hang in there, stay the course, work the program. You can do this. This is Susan Elliott, host of Mean Lady Talking Podcast. Talk to you.